gods to let him know if they came across any worthy opponents for him to fight. That was it. Lucifer couldn't hold back his anger after hearing that, and slammed the table with a resounding bang. As the second most powerful god in the divine realm, he couldn't stand how Mu not only did whatever he pleased, but now even ignored the meeting and the gods entirely. Lucifer wasn't wrong, and most of the gods silently agreed with him. However, even in Mu's absence, none of them dared to openly criticize him. Lucifer pressed on, declaring that the gods' meeting was meant to ensure the stability and safety of their worlds. As the third strongest god, and of course as someone already in Mu's playthings list, the archer god finally spoke up. He argued that if, same as always, any abnormalities occurred, even on Earth, they were the ones who always should take care of them instead of Mu, and that was most unacceptable thing for strongest god among them. Seizing the moment, Lucifer slammed the table again, his voice booming with frustration. He shouted that Mu's habit of treating everything like a game was pushing all the worlds to the brink of collapse. In his opinion, the few times Mu actually decided to solve something usually ended up making things worse. To make his argument more convincing, Lucifer turned to the god of Cyclops, the ninth-ranked deity in the divine realm, and asked if he remembered what Mu had done 1,000 years ago when the Cyclops planet was on the brink of destruction. Back then, a massive ugly creature, as large as the Cyclops planet itself, attacked, a rare being known as a void creature, capable of devouring an entire planet in seconds. Just as the void creature began tearing the Cyclops planet apart, something suddenly shot straight through the middle of it, splitting it into two unequal pieces. That something, of course, was God Mu. With his usual cheerful and flushed face, delighted at the chance for a fight, Mu had effortlessly killed the enormous creature in an instant. Lucifer used this event to drive his point home, trying to make everyone, especially the Cyclops god, see that Mu was to blame for the aftermath of the destruction. He explained that if Mu had cooperated with the other gods instead of acting alone, there wouldn't have been any casualties. Having made his case, and likely swaying the other gods to his side, Lucifer declared that they could no longer stand by and let someone unfit to be a god continue risking the safety of their worlds. On the other side, the dragonling was left speechless. He couldn't do or say anything to defend his lord. The only thing he could do was silently pray, begging his lord to return before things spiraled even further out of control. The scene shifts back to Earth, where the beaten guy started making noise again. He barked at Mu, warning him once more that his boxer cousin is going to make him pay for what he did to him. Hyung, the so-called boxer cousin, was intrigued. He couldn't help but be a little impressed by how fast Mu had moved and punched earlier. Curious, he asked if Mu practiced any sports, like martial arts, but Mu casually replied that he didn't play any sports, because all he wanted was to fight, not play. Mu's response, however, made Hyung think of him as nothing more than an overconfident, dumb middle schooler. Spitting out his chewing gum with a smirk, Hyung took a fighting stance and said he was ready to fight, just as Mu had apparently wanted. Hyung decided to start first, moving quickly to test this guy and see if he was all talk or actually had some skill. His opening strike was fast and sharp, landing hard on Mu's face before Mu could dodge or block. But despite the satisfaction of landing the first blow, something about Mu stunned Hyung. There was something strange, something downright unusual about this opponent, and it sent a chill running up his spine. As an experienced boxer who carefully observed his opponent's movements, Hyung found it strange that Mu didn't move an inch, even when he had clearly been watching the punch coming from the start. Just like the beaten guy who had hired him, Hyung had no idea that his opponent wasn't human, but a god. And not just any god, a god who was absolutely obsessed with fighting. What Hyung also didn't know was that Mu never dodged a preemptive strike. For him, taking the first hit was like a signal, confirming that the battle had officially begun. With his usual unsettling, overly excited grin, Mu suddenly shouted, "Is hand-to-hand combat your favorite thing?" His creepy smile and strange behavior made Hyung wonder if this guy was just some crazy teenager. Then, out of nowhere, Mu mimicked Hyung's fighting stance and launched himself forward. Hyung didn't take it seriously at all, thinking it was just a dumb copycat move. When Mu threw a punch, Hyung blocked it with his hand effortlessly, or so he thought. The force behind Mu's punch sent Hyung sliding backward, surprising him completely. His hand throbbed in pain from underestimating his opponent's strength. He couldn't believe how much power this seemingly weak and scrawny guy had. Meanwhile, Mu looked even more thrilled. His face lit up with excitement as he realized his attack had worked perfectly, just by copying what Hyung had done earlier. There was one thing Mu had to take into account. His current body wasn't something he could rely on just yet. When he tensed his muscles as hard as he could at the moment of impact, the strain left his arm muscles screaming in pain, like they wanted to quit and take a break. Of course, Mu didn't care about the state of his muscles or how much they were suffering. In fact, the more pain he endured, the more he enjoyed the fight. For him, it only made the battle even more satisfying. The thrill of this fight couldn't even compare to the feeling of battling creatures in his godly form. It was raw and exhilarating in a completely different way. Suddenly, to Hyung's surprise, Mu pulled off his belt and wrapped it around his fist. The fact that his current fragile body could cause trouble for him, especially since recovery and healing would take significantly longer, pushed him to come up with this idea. The beaten guy, still watching from the sidelines, thought using a belt made the fight unfair. But neither Mu nor Hyung cared about his opinion. Hyung rushed forward again, this time fully aware that he couldn't afford to underestimate Mu. He started throwing punches, left, right, one after another, trying to overwhelm him with speed and power. Mu managed to block most of the incoming strikes, but even so, he found himself in a pretty rough situation. His movements were limited by the pain in his body, and Hyung's attacks were relentless. In the middle of defending himself, Mu started analyzing his opponent's movements, only to realize they were fast and precise, but way too predictable. Just by observing Hyung's fighting style, Mu quickly began to anticipate his every move. At first, it was hard to figure out, but less than a minute into the fight, Mu was already dodging Hyung's attacks with ease. And if that wasn't enough, when Hyung tried to catch him off guard with a different move, Mu not only blocked the attack but also turned the tables by punching his arm mid-swing. It only took seconds for Hyung to process what had just happened and how his arm ended up broken. He began screaming as the shock wore off and the pain set in. Mu watched him silently, almost amused by the way Hyung reacted. The screaming made Mu wonder if Hyung and that guy from Lee's class were really cousins or something, as they seemed to share the same overly dramatic tendencies. Mu didn't waste much time though. He sealed his victory with another sudden punch to the distracted Hyung, knocking him out cold for a little while. The sight left his friend, or cousin, or whoever he was, completely stunned. Things went from bad to worse for him as Mu's face shifted into a scary, excited expression, practically radiating his eagerness to fight. He declared it was time to pay for all the trouble caused, especially since this wasn't the first time they'd messed with him. The once bully, the guy who had been so arrogant earlier, knew in that moment that with Hyung out of the picture, there was no one left to save him. He had no doubt that a painful fate awaited him now, and there was no escaping it. Mu slowly walked toward Lee's classmate to settle things for the day. As he got closer to the beaten-up guy, Mu noticed that the guy had no intention or will to fight back, and so there was no joy or honor in beating up someone acting so scared. The beaten-up guy, for a moment, noticed Mu's hesitation and thought that if he kept acting this way and just admitted he didn't want to fight anymore, everything might end peacefully. But it was too late to play the victim now. Before he even had the chance to say anything, Mu punched him in the face in one quick move. After all, this was the same guy who had started today's fight by throwing that small stone and bringing a boxer to take Mu down. He couldn't back out now, and even if he wanted to, Mu already had more than enough reason to beat him again. As expected, Mu didn't show a shred of mercy and kept hitting the guy however he wanted, testing out his new copied fighting techniques on his opponent's body one after another. Even as the guy's face and body were covered in bruises and blood, Mu wasn't satisfied. He finished it off with one final brutal knee strike straight to the guy's already battered face. After putting all his strength into making this an unforgettable day for that guy, Mu finally felt satisfied. He wondered, with a mocking tone in his mind, why the guy wouldn't just admit defeat. But deep down, Mu knew he hadn't given the poor guy even the slightest chance to do so. After finishing with both of them, Mu walked away, knowing he had other things to take care of. Not to mention, like all his previous opponents, he left his mark on that boxer and added him to his growing list of playthings. The beaten-up bully, on the other hand, after learning his painful lesson, was muttering Lee's name under his breath, calling him a crazy bastard. It wasn't long before Mu returned to Lee's house. Sitting on his bed, he felt great knowing everything was going exactly as he wanted, and he could enjoy fighting almost every day. However, just like before, his weak muscles and fragile bones that often gave him trouble, even breaking easily while defending himself, were annoying and a bit concerning. Still, in order to hold on to this feeling, a mix of fighting opponents stronger than him and experiencing the pain and recovery throughout his body, Mu decided he would do whatever it took. He decided to return to the God Realm first to see what was going on there.